What is going on, everyone? Matt McCarthy here for GR Weekly, back after a week off, a very well-deserved little mini vacation there in some in some terms or another. But back breaking down Week 6. We haven't been here since the Week 5 review on Monday of last week. So just like every other week, we don't have a lot of time. We have a lot of games to get to, so we're gonna get right into it. As you see on the bottom there. The Week 6 buys have started. So New Orleans, San Francisco, the Jets, and Atlanta. It's odd. Those are not exactly four of the most impactful teams. But as soon as you start taking any sort of players out of the equation, rankings and teams start looking a lot grosser really quickly. So there's some big waiver ads this week, and there's some big games to break down because there's a few teams in some really good spots, and then there's a lot of just sure, this is a fantasy matchup for the week. So we're going to get right into it, so to say. Kicking off. So we have messed around with these banners. Bang. Hold on. There we go. Show schedule for today. We're going to be starting off with the Tampa Bay versus Philadelphia in this Thursday night football game. So starting over on the Tampa Bay side, who are favored by 752.5 point over under. Tampa Bay. Tom Brady. Great. He's back to scoring touchdowns. We like that. We like to see that he goes out and does big things in big game situations. Brady, 4 more touchdowns of 3 of 5 games this season. Back-to-back weeks of 1 touchdown or fewer in the last 2, especially against that big New England game that was overly hyped. That was very disappointing. But he's currently on pace to have
his best season in his career in both attempts, completions, as well as yards. Only 2 seasons of 40-plus touchdowns. His 50 touchdown season, well early in his career, was around 2007 or so. I was a tiny tyke at that time. And last season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But Brady, I put it out on Twitter. Is he a top 5 quarterback going forward? And he may not be a rest of the season kind of locked in sort of guy. We're still messing around with guys like Jackson and Herbert, Mahomes, Allen. And then we start at, Kyler Murray. Was Russell Wilson still in that equation or not? Was Aaron Rodgers in that group or not? Some people even put Jalen Hurts. We'll talk about Jalen Hurts in a second. But currently, Tom Brady, in terms of finishes, has been a top 5 quarterback every single week, but one of the most consistent quarterbacks currently in fantasy outside of guys like Patrick Mahomes, who has a very high floor and has been pretty much as to the billing of what he is. The thing I like about Brady has really been that he, unlike other guys where you say you need to be a Konami type quarterback and having the rushing upside as well, he has had basically none of that and still been putting up the numbers that he has been doing. Having the plethora of weapons at his disposal has really been the beneficiary of that sort of style. We need to look at his weapons because I'm a little perplexed that Chris Godwin goes out week to week and is the highest ranked receiver consistently, and I'm not particularly sure why he has such a higher billing than the other sort of players. Nice to see you as well. It's good to be back. Studies have been good. I've been really busy with school and with life in general, so it's nice to be back doing this sort of content after a little bit of a break, because juggling all these things has been very much kind of a headache, how much school I need to do, plus how much of this on the side, it's kind of like which is really the main focus. And one of the things I've got to pay $10,000 for. So that's kind of where my priorities lie, at least in some regard. So Godwin, Evans, and Antonio Brown, we need to talk about them. Currently, Mike Evans is my favorite of the 3, which seems to be kind of not the consensus sort of thought in terms of how they're normally ranked. So in terms of average finishes this year, Godwin has been on average the wide receiver 27.6, right? So let's say wide receiver 28. Mike Evans has been the wide receiver 27, and Antonio Brown has been the wide receiver 34. Okay, so those are not exciting things. It's like, oh, they haven't been very consistent players for you. That's exactly the point. Godwin has a finish, and this is all in full PPR, wide receiver 12 and wide receiver 13 under his belt. Evans has a finish of wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 5. And Brown has a finish of wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 11. Those are great. Okay, so at least 2 weeks out of the year so far, all 3 of these guys have been a top 12 receiver. But when they're not that, what's kind of the other side of the coin? How badly can they perform for you instead? Last 2 weeks, Chris Godwin has been the wide receiver 30 and wide receiver 58. Mike Evans in week 1 was the wide receiver 80. Otherwise, outside of that, he has not had a finish worse than 28. So at the very worst, he's been a flex type receiver for you, regardless of kind of what his upside has been, which has been 5, 16, and 6 like he was last week. And Antonio Brown, wide receiver 90, is mixed in with a wide receiver 31 finish, as well as those 2 top 12 finishing. So the issue here is, are they all top 24 type ranked receivers? They're going to be. You're pretty much just trying to luck out that it's your week with these guys, because man, it's very much a kind of a headache situation with them every sort of week in terms of how can they really play out for you as a finish, because you don't really care what you think of them going into the week. You want to see what the result is, and for at least half the games with these guys, they've either been amazing opportunities for you or terrible results. So we'll see how it works out. My original notes, we were running on the Gronk news. Gronk is going to be out for this game. Cameron Brate, top 15, still a mess of what the other guys are going to be. Gronk, in terms of what he can do near the red zone, I think is an actual difference maker compared to what Brate can be. So if Gronk was active, he'd be a top 10 sort of guy. He's still a tight end 8 in full PPR and points scored for the season. He hasn't played in 2 weeks. Kind of shows you what the position has been as a whole. But since he was sort of close to being back for this one, do kind of want to see what he's going to be looking like come week 7 when he should be active. And we have a statement here. Patriots winning in an upset. Huge coaching mismatch here, we shall say. We're going to be covering that show on the Friday show for the Dallas Cowboys. I'll say this. McCarthy, I share a last name with Mike McCarthy. I do not share sentiment in terms of how good of a coach Mike McCarthy thinks he is. So I can see with you, New England at home, Dallas only a 4-point favorite. It's going to be, power, strength on strength. Dallas Cowboys offense versus New England defense. Which one's going to really bend, not break? They just played Tampa Bay, a team with pretty much the same sort of offensive gusto that Dallas can bring into town. So I can definitely see a New England upset at home, especially since it's under a 7-point line that Vegas is saying. And Vegas is a lot smarter than me, and they don't like losing money. So I definitely understand when you have an idea like that, definitely in the realm of possibilities. Moving on to the Philadelphia side. The one big thing on the Tampa Bay side was Brady. One big thing here has got to be the curious case of Jalen Hurts. So Jalen Hurts currently has the best floor of any quarterback in the NFL for fantasy purposes. Quarterback 10 has been his worst weekly finish of any for the entire season. Oh, thank you for both the like and sub. Appreciate it. Like I said, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, GR Weekly. We also have multiple other shows on the Gridiron Ratings channel. If you like IDP, Gary and the crew break that down on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And Kyle takes over on for DFS on the weekends, as well as I think he's taken my spot on Off the Grid. Still some things in the flux, in flux on that one. But thanks for stopping in. Appreciate it. So over to Jalen Hurts. His worst weekly finish is quarterback 10. That's really good in terms of what he's going to at least do on the low side. A lot of people are comparing him to Blake Bortles because the one thing that's been going on with Hurts is he's scoring a ton of points. Back end of games, it's not really going consistent production. Just looks good in terms of the final score, but it's kind of how he gets to that point. And I can definitely see the sentiment there. The one thing we do have to at least say with Jalen Hurts, we kind of don't give him the. So I do have an Instagram. I am not. I guess that's where you're coming from, is from Instagram. I'm much more active on Twitter. I don't think I have any posts on Instagram and have not updated my bio in some time. It actually doesn't have Gridiron Ratings in my description, I believe. But over on Twitter, which at Methodical One is, see at the bottom of the screen, I think it's the same handle on both. That's really where I'm primarily hanging out. That's where you see any of my stats, any of my talkings about for my rankings, what you do for fantasypros.com, any sort of stuff like that. So if you like what you're seeing here, head over there, and that's where you're going to see most of my stuff, and also all my jokes and all the other nonsense that goes down. But appreciate it. In terms of quarterback 10, that's been Jalen Hurts' worst weekly finish compared to guys like Patrick Mahomes, right? Second best at quarterback 13. So we're talking about like guys like Brady, talking guys like Allen, Murray. These are all guys that have had worst weekly finishes at least once in their 5-week span. They have not finished as a top 12 for quarterback, while Jalen Hurts has been that every single week this season. Now, is he really busted into be as a top 5 guy? Not particularly. He hasn't really had any super blow, huge explosion games. I think the real issue is that I don't think the offense has enough firepower. Devonta Smith has been a good receiver. He's a good talent for where he is in his career, just like Jalen Hurts. He's basically a rookie. Devonta Smith's a rookie. It's a very young team with those two guys, right? But in terms of wide receiver one options, not fantasy wide receiver one, true wide receiver one options for your team, probably one of the lower top 10 sort of guys in the NFL, just because, in a matter of having a guy in his rookie year do that much for you. And I understand Jamar Chase, but Jamar Chase at least has the beneficiary of having, T. Higgins and having Tyler Boyd and having Joe Mixon. I think the surrounding options, you can't just key in on Chase as much as you can Smith for this Philadelphia Eagles offense. A little bit more stuff in flux for them for sure. And it's really not, again, a big insult against either guys. It's just kind of been the matter of what they've been. Jalen Hurts has also yet to have less than 30 rushing yards in his entire career. That has been his season low. Actually, career low came last week against Carolina, which was that 30 yards on the dot. Moving on. Miles Sanders, I don't really know too much what to make of him. You can't really trust him as the top 24 kind of guy we've been really looking to be. It's just a matter of with the buys and how running back has been. He's going to be pushed into fantasy lineups, so you're not going to be super happy about it, especially because of this Tampa Bay matchup. The worst option you can have for a running back, especially when not giving him the workload as well. Seeing just under 13 touches per game, lowest in his career. Lowest yards per touch as well at 5.1, and lowest yards from scrimmage at 65. It's almost 20 less yards than it was in his rookie season. It's frustrating. It's frustrating because he's on the field, 33 snaps or more per game. But this is I believe, a firm sit. If you have him, you have no other options. I understand getting him out there. I don't want to see him, kind of get pushed to the side for Kenneth Gainwell, because Gainwell is going to be used in the passing game. So here's the issue. If Gainwell is used in the passing game and Sanders is not in hurry up or come from behind or total passing down situations, this is a Gainwell game. They've used him like this in the past. And we just saw Myles Gaskin go out in a spot where he was on the sit of the week for many people, myself included, have a 74 yards on 10 receptions sort of performance with 2 scores. This is very much a super problem for me to see what he's going to be doing. And we do have a question. Were you able to observe how Darnold's last week against the Eagles' porous defense? Was it more Darnold wide receiver connection or the Eagles' secondary stepping up? Technically, the Eagles' secondary has been overproductive through first 5 weeks. It was more, they've had in kind of low-scoring games. They've been in odd situations. I think 2 things have gone on with Carolina. In terms of defense and in the offense, I think they have been a product of the schedule. I think Darnold has looked very good in odd sort of situations, mostly how good he's been on, carrying the ball on the ground. He doesn't have a ton of rushing yards, but has tons of rushing touchdowns, which is really, I think, ballooned his fantasy output, which is not stuff that I think is very, repeatable, because it's not very, I have to look up the numbers. I don't believe there's very many running backs who have more rushing touchdowns than Sam Darnold was. I believe at one point he was leading the NFL in rushing scores. And again, and the Eagles secondary comes into account because they've really had between the San Francisco game and the Falcons game, they've had a lot of spots where they haven't had teams need to pass a ton on them. So Kansas City came into in week 4, right? So the Kansas City offense comes into town. Technically, Eagles defense in terms of fantasy points allowed in week 4 was one of the lowest in the NFL. Then what does Tyreek Hill go and do? He has 200 yards and 3 scores, whatever he does. I don't think the secondary is overly productive. This is one of the worst run defenses as well. I think there's a lot to like on this Tampa Bay side. I didn't even include Leonard Fournette in my discussion, mostly because I think right now he's just a pretty firm must start. I don't think Ronald Jones is really being accounted for in this offense. But right now, I don't think the Eagles defensively are going to be able to really contain a lot of what Tampa Bay can do. It's just more of a matter. If there was 2 guys or there was consistency with receivers, you would have one of those, Godwin, Evans, or Brown, ranked a lot higher. But just showcasing that their weekly finishes are so scattered, and it's kind of like, okay, now it's Brown's week, or now it's Evans' week, or now it's Godwin's week. That's why they can't be locked in top 12 options for me when I'm ranking, because it's not very consistent in how their overall production has been compared to what their opportunities have been. So for me, I do think there's 1 or 2 successful Tampa Bay receivers. You just really can't say which one it is. I lean Evans as the most likely, then Godwin, then Brown at the moment. And finishing out this game with the Philadelphia receivers, starting Devonta Smith, I'd like to just treat Rager as a flyer. But Dallas Goedert most likely ruled out for this game with the COVID protocol. I don't believe at this moment he's been confirmed to be out, but if he is out, that's most likely what's going to be the case. Ertz, my preferred option of both tight ends in this game with no Gronkowski. Top 8 option for me currently. Tampa Bay, the 6th most fantasy points allowed to the position on the year, starting over guys like TJ Hawkinson. We'll talk more about Hawkinson when we get to the Detroit game. Do have a question here. What do you think of my 10-team standard lineup this week? Ooh, standard. Don't have any standard leagues these days. Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, if he plays, Zeke, McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Tony Brown, Zach Ertz, Cowboys, and McLaughlin. Do like that. Monty, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Michael Thomas. All right, listen. 10-team leagues were because I had to drop Odell Beckham due to buys and injuries in the league because I have guys like Allen Robinson and Julio Jones and just a mess of receivers that it's kind of strange to see, like, who do you keep and who you get rid of. I do like it. Again, standard is not really my bag. I'm more of a half PPR or PPR in general sort of guy, but with a lot of that roster, not knowing what your bench is or what your opponent's going to be looking like. I do like the team. Like I said, you just got to make sure that Christian McCaffrey is playing. If he is, great. If he's not, that's a bummer. The entire game, both Minnesota and Carolina, I'm not ranking their running backs right now with the information we currently have because we can't particularly say who's going to start for either team. Whoever does start, I think, is in a good spot. So I can at least say that. So unless you don't have Chuba Hubbard, just make sure, or Chuba Hubbard, make sure you just do have other options there for now. Moving on. The Sunday night football game, the Sunday morning football game, Miami versus Jacksonville. Miami favored by 3.5. You have Damian Williams. You also have to make sure because Damian Williams technically did not. I don't believe it was either limited or did not practice today. So make sure just to keep tabs on him. It is a 10-team league, so there's a possibility for other options out there. Khalil Herbert would be the easy just pivot off on that one. I think Williams plays. A lot of Wednesday news I don't even pay too much attention to, mostly just because of. A lot of veteran players aren't even playing on practicing on Wednesdays. It's very much a upkeep sort of day. Thursday is when you want to take note of, okay, who's actually practicing or not, and then go from there. Miami versus Jacksonville. Miami favored by 3.5, 47 point over under. Starting on the Miami side, one big thing, I just got to tell you, of course, Gaskin goes off on the week that very much everyone and their mother said, do not play him. Big bummer on that one. A lot of Gaskin teams I have, and a lot of Gaskin going off of my bench. And he's just been frustrating because you go from him having his lowest season snap percentage of 24 in week 4 to a season high in week 5 against Tampa Bay, the team to avoid running back starting against, at 67%. It bothers me. But Tua has been activated off of IR. Now, I do not know if he's going to play or not. But it does matter effect of how it affects other players for the week. Mike Gesicki, for sure. If Gesicki and Brissett are the duo, he's my tight end 5. If it's Tua and Gesicki, tight end 8. Because Gesicki has had a lot of love coming from Brissett, and he wasn't having too much love coming from Tua. So, and tight end being what it be, we kind of have to just, hope that we can have as much consistency in sort of our ideas on players going into it. But I prefer if Brissett starts this game for just Gesicki. How it plays out for the other players is to be seen. I haven't really been too overly impressed with Tua when he was playing. Let's see how that whole goes on that one. In terms of the rest of the team, Waddle's really the only receiver I want to have in play on this one. Devontae Parker, if he's active for this game, that does help. This is kind of a gross overall game, especially, with 2 undersended because it kind of affects Gesicki, which is one of the better plays, I think, on the Miami side. Over to Jacksonville. Lawrence is a fine QB2 option. One game this season of multiple passing touchdowns, 2 games of 250 yards or more. He's a rookie. He's been fine. He's been one of the more productive offensive rookies. I did see it was very strange. I think it was Bleacher Report today said that their choice for offensive rookie of the year was Mac Jones, who has not even been the best quarterback. I'd say it's been Lawrence of the rookie group, and Jamar Chase is literally setting the world on fire and having one of the best rookie seasons of all time outside of Randy Moss. So I don't know on that one. There's other bigger upside spots like Ben Roethlisberger against that Seattle team that allows anyone to do anything they want fantasy-wise against them. But James Robinson, just outside my top 5 running back, or might have moved into it. Yes, just outside. Running back 6, and I have considered pushing him ahead of Derrick Henry. And that just feels a little too, what's the word? Too cute. Yeah, too cute to kind of, because I don't like that Buffalo matchup at all. It's we have to see, especially what the receivers are going to be doing, if they're active or not in terms of Brown and Julio Jones. But currently, the Buffalo Bills, you do not score against them. You do not get points. They are an elite team, kind of on both sides of the ball currently. But James Robinson, back to him. I don't understand how Urban Meyer said he kind of just forgot to use Robinson, how he forgot to have him out on the field in that game. He's not in control of his personnel in big spots. I don't get how he's an NFL coach. It's a good thing there was another NFL coach in the news that took a lot of the heat off Urban Meyer for, 1, his play calling, and 2, his off the field sort of situation. But 3 straight games of 20+ points, full PPR, top 12 finishes in all 3 for James Robinson. Had 2 touches in the fourth quarter in week 5. 6 in total in the second half. It's just an odd team. They need to use their best players in better ways, which also starts with Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault. Prefer Jones to Shenault. They're both in wide receiver 3 sort of territory for me. They're supposed to both take a step up after DJ Chark goes down for the year, combined for 2 receptions in week 5. I don't see a repeat of that poor performance. Both flexes for me. Moving on to Green Bay versus Chicago. One of the most boring games on the week. Green Bay favored by 4.5, 45-point over-under. Starting on the Green Bay side, you're going to start Rodgers just inside the top 12 in this boring game. Adams and Jones, locks, cool. No other real starts for me. We'll talk about one big thing in A.J. Dillon, right? Because Dillon, 4 targets last week. That's a career high. I don't understand how he gets 4 targets. But he's also seen his second and third most snaps in his career over the last 2 weeks. Jones looked a little bit banged up after the week 3 San Francisco game, but we kind of want the train to run unimpeded for Aaron Jones. He's the guy we want to do the big things, and he has not really had the big performances outside of that huge, 4 touchdown game that he had back against was it week 2 or week 3? So we need Aaron Jones to really show that he is the Aaron Jones that we really want him to be. I'm looking at the game logs here in terms of in full PPR. Outside of week 2 against Detroit, a 42-point game, 17.6, 10.9, 14.9 have been his outputs. 2 of those games, San Francisco and Pittsburgh, I do respect at least their run defense in some regard. The Cincinnati one, I expected better than 15 points. Upcoming games: Washington, Arizona, and Kansas City, Seattle after the Chicago game. Week 7 through week 10. If you can have any bit of getting Aaron Jones right now for any reason, he's going to explode after week 6. That stretch right there. Arizona game, I respect that defense. They've actually really controlled opposing offenses. It's not like you had Arizona, scoring at will and having the opposing team also, be highly offensive productive. That's a good defense, I think. But Washington and Kansas City are 2 of the worst in football, and Seattle's probably 3rd worst. That is an amazing schedule upcoming for the Packers. Just have to really make note of that for sure. But if Aaron Jones starts ceding more and more work to Dillon, they need more real offensive production outside of Adams and Jones. Can they technically do it all themselves? Yes, they kind of did that in San Francisco. But Robert Tonyan has had less than 10 yards in 4 or 5 games this season. Marcus Valdes-Scantling has been out. Randall Cobb, he's Randall Cobb. We're not expecting too much out of him. They need some sort of more production from means that aren't Jones and Adams. Is it A.J. Dillon? I kind of hope it not to be, but they really need a 3rd guy to just be something for them to really be a good overall offense. And sorry, I'm talking about great offenses. Let's go over talk about Chicago, right? So, Chicago. Don't start Fields. Don't start the receivers. Don't start Kmet. It's just a running backs, and their top 30 plays by hook or by crook. This offense is terrible. Let's break down what the Chicago Bears offense is, right? They are the worst at, from Pro Football Reference, passing yards, total yards, passing touchdowns, and net yards per attempt. They're the second worst at pass attempts and net yards per drive. They're the third worst at points scored. They're the fourth worst in points per drive, and the fifth worst in first downs. There's not much of anything good to say about the Chicago Bears offense. There's two running backs that can get 16 touches. So that's cool. And that's really all there is to it. You start the running backs. I had to make a decision if I wanted to drop Allen Robinson in the league. I ended up dropping Odell Beckham Jr. instead. So I guess that showcases that there's some hope for Robinson. But in full PPR, his best finish this year has been wide receiver 49. So I'm going to keep ranking him outside my top 40 because his offense sucks. And I hate it. We do have a statement here. See, you dropped Jamison Crowder in the league. I don't know which league it is, NBA rig. So we do play together. I'm in 18 leagues. I probably had to drop Crowder because of probably buys. Again, I don't even know which league you're talking about. Is that even more of a need for running back? Or are you out in the Jets offense? It's probably the need for running back because I don't know who I dropped him for. But that's probably the reason. So that, that Jets offense, if there's probably a team worse than the Chicago Bears, and it's the New York Jets. So Crowder, I picked him in a lot of spots because I liked him against that Atlanta Falcons defense. If there was going to be a time, I thought Crowder would be somewhat productive after the Tennessee game. I thought, all right, back-to-back games of them having good offensive production, and then they came out and embarrassed themselves in the first half over in London. I don't know why they keep sending those bad teams to London. I think it's revenge for the War of 1812 because we got our independence after the Revolutionary War. So that's my personal take on it. Drafting for Devontae Booker, yeah, because they're probably need a starting running back. It's rough in these streets. I'm gonna drop Jamison Crowder for a player I probably need to start this week because running back is hell. So that's probably the reason why. Cincinnati versus Detroit. Cincinnati favored by 3.5, which I think is a low spread. I think Cincinnati is I think we need to respect Cincinnati. That's a field goal made 4-1 team possibility. So I don't think 3.5 is giving much credit to the Bengals right now. 47.5 point over under. Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, all mixing at top 12 at their respective positions. We do think that both Burrow and Mixon will have no necessary issues stemming from last week. Mixon was a surprise active for me. The fact that he even got in that game, so I'm ranking him as a top 12 player like he should be going forward. Samaje Perine, still going to be ranked inside my top 40, so, some odd. If he does get this receiving work, I did see a report saying that Mixon lost his receiving work to the Perine. I didn't even think Mixon was going to be active for that game. That's the only thing he got at all from that experience in week 5 is gravy for me. I expect him to go back to being what he was, which is a guy who can handle every single running back carry the team wants to throw at him, because they had back-to-back weeks of week 2 and week 3, or week 3 and week 4 of no other running backs even touching the ball for a carry in that Cincinnati backfield. But for this, we really have to, talk about the wide receivers behind Jamar Chase, right? So Chase, as a top 12 receiver right now, he's having just an amazing season. We got to talk about Higgins. We got to talk about Tyler Boyd. Higgins mixing in top 24 for me. I think he's going to be a little more back to speed. Was not even at sort of a spot where we thought, how healthy is he? How healthy was Mixon? Those were questions going into the Green Bay game. Should take more of a step forward now. Going into the year, this was supposed to be the number one receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. Jamar Chase has just been on fire, having 30 plus yard touchdowns and almost every single week this season. But it's hard to say how much Chase gets hurt by them coming in. With him being Jamar Chase scoring a touchdown on one of every 5 receptions, which is an insane sort of rate right now. Boyd is a flex only for me. There's no really particular big boom potential in him. He's great to get you, 10 odd points or so in full PPR, 12.2 on this season. He feels like right now, like a Hunter Renfrow type guy, which is, because they're going to be ranked very closely to each other actually in my rankings over on fantasypros.com. And CJ Uzama, solid 1 point last week. Was a fluke from week 4 and nothing else on the Cincinnati side. Over to Detroit, who actually it's pretty simple for me, right? You want to start Swift. You're kind of have to start Williams, and you have to start Hawkinson. The problem with Hawkinson has been he's given you outside the top 20 at tight end each of the last 3 weeks, right? Why? Because they've had to have receiver production be in very random ways. Whereas Khalif Raymond, Almon St. Brown, you haven't even been to have a real pin as to who that receiver actually is. So for on Detroit, the one player I'm starting with confidence is Swift. There's 3 players you can start with moderate sort of, I have expectations of, 40% or more, confidence in these guys having days where I'm not totally lambasting the fact that I started them. And then the receivers, I think, are flex darts at the best. You can come away with 1 point. You come away with maybe 12 points. But there's really not much consistency over on Detroit. Jared Goff, for me, just in quarterback 2 or super flex sort of leagues as a start only. Next game, if we said the Chicago game was most boring, this is the most straightforward. Houston versus Indianapolis. Indianapolis favored by 9.5, 42.5 point over under. One of the lowest, lowest point totals on the week. It is the lowest. Tied with Seattle versus Pittsburgh for the lowest. That's interesting to me, actually. But back to this game. Over on the Houston side, you start Cooks and you start no one else. Over on the Indianapolis side, you're going to start the Colts DST. You're going to start Jonathan Taylor, and I think you're going to start Michael Pittman. T.Y. Hilton is going to be active sooner rather than later. So maybe in week 7, week 8, we might see him back. Curious to see what his involvement's going to be. But they do need a second option, or I think outside of Pittman, to really be a productive force. Nice of Pittman to score last week. Outside of Jacoby Myers, who's one of the most targeted receivers in the NFL without a score. Nice to see him come down with one against Baltimore over on Monday, which was a crazy game. The rest are team-specific starts, right? Hines and Mack as RB3s or worse, and Carson Wentz in 2 QB leagues only. For me, Jonathan Taylor was a top 3 back, and it was kind of a weird. I did have it, not weird. It was a pretty straightforward interaction today on Twitter. So talking about Jonathan Taylor's snap percentages, why he's not getting more snaps. The one thing we have to understand with, I think, both the Colts and the NFL at large, the average amount of snaps the running back one plays for a team in a 2020 was around half the snaps, around 50%. Only one player had more than 70% of their team's running back snaps, which is David Montgomery, because that running back room for Chicago was extremely depleted. Only one player had more snaps than him at the position, which was Ezekiel Elliott. It was like, high 900 total snaps for Elliott. But in terms of at the position, only 12 running backs played 55% or more of their team snaps in 2020. We're talking about guys like Derrick Henry, a guy that we think is going to be, run the ball every single down. It's not like he had 80% of the snaps. David Montgomery was the most, 71%. So you have to look at a team like Houston that has been mixing in multiple running backs for years now. This has just been what they've been doing under Frank Reich. So with Jonathan Taylor, do we want to see more production out of him? Of course. Do we want him to go out and explode in a big game situation here that he can have against Houston? Obviously. But if he's not on the field, or he's just getting rested by the Indianapolis Colts, this is just kind of what they have done, and what the NFL kind of expects other running backs and at large is that they're not playing. We want, fantasy points per snap. We would love them to be out there as often as possible, but that's just kind of the nature of the position right now. It's just their teams are mixing in players, in and out on every single drive. That's just kind of how it really all plays out. Moving on. Los Angeles Chargers versus Baltimore. Baltimore favored by 3 points, 51.5 point over under. Starting over on the Los Angeles Chargers side, you're starting Herbert, you're starting Eckler, you're really starting everyone, right? They're all top 12 options of the main 5, right? I think there's a big discussion that needs to be had here for Keenan Allen as a top 12 receiver. Fielded the question over on my Twitter at Methodical1, talking about, is Keenan Allen still a top 12 wide receiver in redraft rest of season? All right. So Allen's best finish so far in full PPR, which would be his best format, is wide receiver 14. Does have another finish at wide receiver 20. All the rest have been wide receiver 30 or worse. Right? Hasn't had a 100-yard performance in 3 weeks. Only one score in the season, which is against Kansas City, which isn't necessarily impressive considering Kansas City allows scoring to everyone, as they're the worst defense in the NFL. But let's talk about what his averages are and what his pace currently is for 2021. So currently on pace for around 170 targets, 108 receptions, 1,180 yards, and 3+ touchdowns, right? His 4-year average leading up to 2021, he's outpacing his targets, and this is a 16-game pace. This is not a 17-game pace. 147 targets, 100 receptions, 1,195 yards, 6 touchdowns. So he's higher on targets and receptions, lower on yards and touchdowns. But his opportunity share is up. We can just see that in terms of how much he's already getting targeted, considering he's not actually performing as well as he used to do. But he's also up in terms of snaps, right? So both his snaps are up, highest percentage of snaps he's ever played in his career, around 87% of the snaps for the LA Chargers currently on the year, which is about 3 or 4% higher than he's had at any point in the year that Pro Football Reference does have the data for, right? LA Chargers third in plays per game, right? 68.8 currently per teamrankings.com. Currently only Tennessee and Buffalo running more plays, which is great because it's a Monday Night Football game and like that a lot. Chargers were first in 2020, 23rd in 2019, 28 in 2018, and 15 in 2017. They've become a more up-tempo and heavy play offense in the last 2 years, but they are a better overall offense here in 2021. Austin Eckler being available and Mike Williams being a productive measure, probably the reason for it. 25 first downs on average per game currently in 2021, 41 yards per drive. Compared to 2020, which is 23 first downs per game and 35 yards per drive. 37 yards in 2019, 35 and 34 consecutively in the years prior, right? Both he and Williams are going to be top 12 options. I think Keenan Allen is going to be looked at as a player who's getting a lot of receiver work and a lot of receiver looks, but is not getting exactly the pay dirt sort of payoff sort of stuff you're looking for. You're looking for touchdowns, you're looking for big yardage games. You don't really care that he has, X amount of receptions and all that. I think there's just a measure here that in this game and for the rest of the season going forward for the Chargers, Keenan Allen is still a player you drafted and still a player you should be looked at. Mike Williams has not been, really that big of a detriment. In all honesty, of him being productive and Austin Eckler also being a monster really helps the overall offense get to scoring, get more drives in a productive manner, get positive net yardage. All that sort of stuff is very, very important for the Chargers at large, right? Moving over to Baltimore. Start Jackson, sit the running backs. Murray, my favorite, but yeesh. But we got to talk about Hollywood Brown. Because 4 top 12 finishes of Hollywood Brown, even with those drops in that Detroit game, just outside my top 20 here, right? Because here's the thing. Rashad Bateman might be back, but I don't want to play too much into that with how many snaps and what his target share is going to look like. But I do really respect the cornerback duo that the LA Chargers have between Asante Samuel and Chris Harris. Currently, the LA Chargers are the second worst wide receiver fantasy points allowed you can have in the NFL. Buffalo is the strongest matchup. Do not play receivers against Buffalo currently. There are other ways to attack the LA Chargers defense, especially on the ground. The receivers is not the way. With Samuel, with Samuel and Harris, we've seen how if either of them is going to necessarily strictly shadow on Hollywood Brown, but for me, this is one of the tougher ranks because he has been a very, very productive receiver. But in this matchup, I think there are better receivers you can turn to. I think all 3 of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are better gambles in week 6 than Hollywood Brown is in this very tough matchup, I think, against the Chargers. Can he still come down with it? Of course. That's why I have him as a top 12 for receiver skill to be productive. But I think guys like Mark Andrews here coming off a massive game could be in for a better overall production if he's not being shadowed or really heavily covered like they're going to possibly do with Brown. We just saw that Odell Beckham game, with him being looked at as their primary receiving option in a game where 500 yards were scored, no turnovers, 40-something points. And Odell Beckham goes down with two receptions for 20 yards. Just shows how strong a matchup this is for opposing wide receivers. Speaking of Mark Andrews, tight end 2, possibly, also the rest of the season. I think he's really starting to light up and get going. 5 targets in each game this year. 5 receptions and 4 straight games. First time he's done that in his career. Tight end has been a very, touchdown dependent position, but you've been very, very happy with him with no scores up until week 5. I think he is going to start lighting it up and really be, in that class of Waller and whenever, Kittle is active, and really pushing Kelsey for that tight end 1. Speaking of Kelsey, Kansas City versus Washington, 2 games left on the docket. Kansas City favored by 7, 55.5 point total. worst and second worst defense in the NFL in points allowed in this one. Start the big Kansas City 3. And Daryl Williams, I do not want to be facing any of the big 3 Kansas City Chiefs in week 6, because after an entire week of everyone saying, is there a problem with Mahomes or the Kansas City Chiefs, not the team we thought of them? Are they no longer in the driver's seat in the AFC? Are we not going to see a team that went to the Super Bowl this time? This, that, and the other thing. I think they're going to be sick and tired of hearing about it. I do not want to face any of them. Josh Allen in a very, very, very good matchup against Tennessee is the only quarterback I would have over Patrick Mahomes. Do you see Mecole Hardman getting more involved? I kind of do. Would you rank Crowder higher than Hardman, or do you see Hardman's upside? I guess you're asking for rest of the season because obviously Crowder is on bye in week 6. Well, what's wrong with the rest of the New York Jets? We've been kind of fooled by Hardman before, so I don't want to go too far out of my reach on him. Let me see where I have him ranked right now for week 6. It's not going to be very high, I can tell you that. So I'd rather start him over anyone on Chicago. I currently have him as a wide receiver 45. In terms of how that matches up in terms of the rest of the Fantasy Pros rankers, I'm technically on the high side for half PPR purposes, which is the official scoring system for it. The average for him is around 48 or lower. So technically I'm in on Hardman, but no one has him ranked higher than wide receiver 36. So that answers your question about what's the general idea for him as a whole. I do rank him higher than Adam Humphrey, so I think is an option in this game. Curtis Samuel, because if he even plays, they're really there's a possibility that they rushed him back too early with the groin injury. But to be seen what is really going to be a look for him going forward. Because I think Samuel would have been a good option in this one, but I don't think he's really going to be out there playing for him. Moving on, Daryl Williams is going to be a top 20 option, also a running back. Has Clyde Edwards-Helaire been an overly dramatic good running back? No. But it's Kansas City in one of the best matchups you can have in football because Washington is terrible. Tyreek Hill is going to come down with a 70-yard catch in this game. That's just what's going to happen. Washington has just been so bad against big plays. It's like every single week you see a guy gets behind their secondary and he's like 10 yards downfield with no one even around him. And it's like, I don't understand that team at all. Washington, I can't think of a defense that has been more disappointing than Washington. Chase Young, I thought would have been a player pushing for defensive player of the year. I think it took till last week for him to even have his first sack on the season. This has been a bad defense. Just shame on them. But over to the Washington side, top 5 for both of the main guys over on Washington for both Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin. Taylor Heinicke, top 12 for me. If there's ever going to be a time to rank Taylor Heinicke in the top 12, especially with a few teams on bye, this is it. This is the game. Kansas City is the team. They're scoring 30 points per game. They're allowing 30 points per game. This is a big matchup. You want every single guy that can have really like good production out of Washington and going forward any player against Kansas City because they've just been garbage. But love both those guys. Heinicke top 12. I'd actually start him over Aaron Rodgers. But Ricky Seals-Jones near top 15 option at tight end. And like I said, Adam Humphries, I think mixes in there. J.D. McKissick, I think, is a fine option as well. It's really both of the main guys, though. Kind of greedy. I really want Gibson and McLaurin to both have 100-yard days. Looking for that big things coming for that the Kansas City Washington game as a whole. Highest, I believe, point total on the week. And one last game. Kind of an easy one to talk about. Minnesota versus Carolina. Minnesota favored by 1, 46-point over/under. Cousins just outside my top 12. Prefer Heinicke to him, prefer Rodgers to him, but if he's a guy that you need to start, I'm okay with it. We got to talk about Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen finishes per week in full PPR. Wide receiver 4, wide receiver 29, wide receiver 21, wide receiver 63, and wide receiver 70. Compared with Justin Jefferson, 45, 19, 4, 10, and 17. I'm a little worried that they can't both be productive at the same time. Now, Thielen has been having a lot of that work come off of touchdowns early on in the year. So if Jefferson is a locked and loaded top 10 sort of guy, can Adam Thielen be so? For me, currently, no. I am just outside my top 30. He's not a player I'm currently trusting. Do I think the Carolina defense is overly strong? No, I think they were a product of the offensive teams they are playing against, but I do respect them enough to at least contain a guy that's been really uninspiring in Adam Thielen so far this year. Also, the running backs, which is the one big thing for both teams. Whatever guy starts, you start. Dalvin Cook is active. Awesome. Start him. Alexander Madison is active and the only one starting. Cool. Start him. Same thing on the Carolina side. If McCaffrey is active, you start him. If not, another week of Chuba Hubbard. Great. Panthers, only other option is going to be DJ Moore as a top 12 kind of guy. Darnold, I prefer Cousins to Darnold, just outside my top 12. He's going to be a high quarterback 2, super flex sort of option. Really all there needs to be doing. I still think he's not particularly inspiring right now as a passer. But if he keeps doing rushing things, great for him. It's very, let's say, selfish. It's a little selfish because we want, Robbie Anderson to ever be a thing. But currently, Robbie Anderson outside my top 40. DJ Moore currently accounting for 33% of Sam Darnold's red zone passing within the 10-yard line. He's just so focused on DJ Moore being the guy for Carolina. With no CMC in there. If he is, let's see how that really changes. But McCaffrey really is, such a big part of that offense, and a lot of that has really fallen on Moore's plate and no one else's, unfortunately. But with that, we're going to be back here on Friday. And again, there was no New York Giants LA Rams game because we have absolutely no idea who's going to be playing for the New York Giants right now. Could be Daniel Jones. I think Barkley is probably the safest one to say he's not playing. No idea what the receivers. I think Shepard probably, Godley's probably not. We don't know right now. They're a 10-point spread right now. Let's see how that all changes with the actives or inactives. Let's wait to see about all that. Don't want to talk about a team that I can't even give good, accurate advice about. But with that, I'm going to start wrapping it up. So if this is the first time or last time you spent your time with me, enjoyed it, appreciate it. If you leave a like, subscribe. We got a bunch of shows on the Gridiron Ratings channel. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Me, GR Weekly. Tuesdays and Thursdays, got Gary and the crew breaking down IDP, which I do not do. I like DSTs. I do not like IDPs. I don't do that stuff. And then on the weekend, you got Kyle breaking down the slate with all the DFS stuff you want to talk about and get some money in your pockets. But with that, if you want to follow more of what I do, go over on Twitter at Methodical1. It's on the bottom of the screen right there. So with that, I'll be back on Friday. And I'm going to see you. And then I forgot what I normally do to sign off the show. So I'm just going to say,